The Quiet One. The neon signs of Gamma Station's Merchant District painted the rain-slicked walkways in electric blues and purples, their glow reflecting off the towering crystalline structures that house thousands of species from across the galaxy. Among the evening crowd, Marcus Chen's small shop stood out for its simplicity, a modest storefront with hand-painted Terran characters alongside Universal Standard script, Earth antiquities and curiosities. Inside, Marcus carefully wrapped an ancient pocket watch in preservation film while his customer, a six-armed Helsink scholar, watched with compound eyes gleaming in fascination. The timepiece was genuine Earth craftsmanship, circa 1890s, and Marcus took pride in explaining its mechanical innards to interested clients. "The ingenuity of your species never ceases to amaze," the Helsinks remarked, delicately accepting the wrapped package. "To think you achieved such precision engineering before achieving spaceflight." Marcus offered a modest smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes. At first glance, he appeared unremarkable. Average height for a human, with graying temples and laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of a life well lived. His movements, however, carried an unconscious grace that most failed to notice. "We're a persistent bunch," he replied softly. The shop's door chimed as Sarah, his wife, returned from the market. Her red hair was damp from the station's scheduled evening precipitation, but her green eyes sparkled as she carried in a basket of fresh hydroponics produce. The Helsinks bid them farewell, and Sarah moved behind the counter to kiss Marcus's cheek. "The Drachnids are at it again," she murmured, pitching her voice low. "3 shops closed this week. Protection money's going up." Marcus's hand stilled over the antique ledger he'd been updating. The Drachnids, a species of cybernetically enhanced warriors who'd turned to organized crime after their empire crumbled, had been expanding their territory on the station. Their leader, Vorkath, was notorious for making examples of those who refused to pay. "We'll be fine," he assured her, though his tone carried a weight that spoke of more than mere optimism. Sarah knew some of his past, more than most, but even she didn't know everything about the years before they'd met, when he'd worked for a very different kind of organization. The evening progressed quietly until the shop's windows rattled with the bass thrum of approaching heavy footsteps. Marcus felt the vibrations through the floorboards before he heard them, an old instinct making his fingers twitch toward a hidden compartment under the counter. Sarah touched his arm, a gentle restraint. The door burst open, its chime discordant as 3 Drachnids ducked through the entrance. Their cybernetic enhancements gleamed dully under the shop's warm lighting. Shoulder-mounted targeting systems, reinforced skeletal structures, and neural combat processors that made them lethal fighters. Their leader, a scared veteran missing his original eyes, surveyed the shop through glowing red optical implants. "Quaint little place," the leader rumbled, casually knocking over a display of 21st century commemorative coins. "Be a shame if something happened to it." Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself subtly between the Drachnids and Sarah. "We're closing for the evening," he said quietly. "Perhaps you could return tomorrow during business hours." The leader, Marcus recognized him as Krev, Vorkath's enforcer, laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Funny thing about business hours, they depend on businesses staying open. Lately, some shops have been struggling. But we offer insurance, don't we, boys?" His companions grinned, cybernetic jaws clicking. One casually lifted a pristine Ming vase, studying it with exaggerated care. "That's 1,000 years of history you're holding," Marcus said, his voice unchanged but something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "I'd appreciate you setting it down." "Or what, human?" Krev stepped closer, towering over Marcus. "You'll report us to station security. They know better than to interfere. Or maybe you'll try to stop us yourself." He reached out to grab Marcus's shirt. Time seemed to slow. Marcus saw multiple scenarios play out in his mind, old training asserting itself. He could disable Krev in 7 different ways from this position, none of which would reveal his full capabilities. He could end the confrontation in seconds, but that would mean running again, starting over somewhere new. Sarah had built a life here. They both had. Instead, Marcus did something far harder than fighting. He remained still, allowing Krev to lift him slightly off his feet. "We close in 10 minutes," he repeated calmly. "Whatever business you have, it can wait until tomorrow." Krev's optical implants whirred as they adjusted, scanning Marcus's vital signs. For a moment, confusion crossed his scared features. Where was the fear? The elevated heartbeat, the stress indicators. This human was either stupid or... "Tomorrow, then," Krev growled, releasing Marcus. "We'll discuss your insurance premium. Better have 50,000 credits ready." He turned to leave, then paused. "And human? Don't even think about running. We have eyes everywhere on this station." After they left, Sarah rushed to Marcus, hands checking him for injury, despite knowing there wouldn't be any. "We could leave," she whispered. "Find another station, another sector." Marcus shook his head, watching the drachnids retreat through the shop's windows. No more running. He touched the hidden compartment under the counter, feeling the familiar weight of what lay within. "But I think it's time to remind some people why humanity survived first contact." In the distance, station alerts announced the end of the precipitation cycle. The artificial night was beginning. And with it, the rules of engagement were about to change. Marcus Chen had spent 15 years burying his past, becoming the quiet shopkeeper, the gentle husband. But as he began his closing routine, his movements carried a different kind of precision. The kind that came from years of wet work in the darker corners of human space. The drachnids had made a critical error. They assumed his silence was weakness, his patience was fear. They would learn, as so many others had, that humanity's greatest predators often wore the quietest smiles. Breaking point. The next morning came too quickly on Gamma Station, artificial dawn casting long shadows through the marketplace. Marcus moved through his morning routine with practiced efficiency, checking inventory, updating security feeds, and maintaining the complex environmental controls that kept Earth's ancient treasures preserved. But today, each action served a dual purpose. Hidden cameras shifted their angles. Pressure sensors were recalibrated. Inventory was rearranged to create clear lines of sight and narrow choke points. To anyone watching, it would appear as nothing more than a meticulous shopkeeper's preparations. Sarah noticed, of course. She'd learned to read the subtle signs over their years together. "You're getting ready," she observed, not a question. Like Novalis Prime. Marcus paused in his work, memories of that frontier colony surfacing, of pirates who'd thought a human settlement would make an easy target. "This is different," he said softly. "More complicated. The drachnids have embedded themselves in the station's power structure." Their first customers of the day were a pair of Meridian diplomats, their crystalline bodies chiming softly as they browsed Earth's historical weapons. Marcus watched them with half his attention, the rest focused on the street outside where drachnid enforcers were making their morning rounds. "Fascinating," one of the Meridians hummed, gesturing at a katana. "Your species crafted implements of death with such artistry. We learned early that beauty and lethality often walk hand in hand," Marcus replied, careful not to let his gaze linger too long on the street. The drachnids were systematically visiting each shop, their cybernetic implants recording everything for later analysis. The diplomats had just left when Krev returned, this time with 5 enforcers. They spread out through the shop, their heavy footfalls making display cases tremor. Sarah moved to the back room, not in fear, but following a protocol they'd established years ago. "Time to discuss business," Krev announced, his optical implants scanning the shop's layout. Something about it bothered him, but his combat systems couldn't identify why. 50,000 credits. Monthly. Call it an investment in your future. Marcus stood behind the counter, his posture relaxed, but his weight perfectly balanced. "That's more than our monthly revenue," he stated simply. "Then perhaps you should find additional revenue streams," Krebs' metallic laugh echoed as one of his enforcers casually smashed a display case containing Victorian jewelry. Or perhaps your lovely wife could provide alternative services. The temperature in the shop seemed to drop several degrees. Marcus's expression hadn't changed, but something in his eyes made one of the younger enforcers take an involuntary step back. "I'm going to give you a chance," Marcus said, his voice carrying the same quiet tone he used to discuss antiques. "Walk away. Leave this shop, this sector, this station. Because if you don't, what happens next will be your choice, not mine." Krebs' combat systems registered the threat, but his pride overrode the warning signals. With cybernetic speed, he drew his plasma pistol and aimed it at Marcus's head. Brave words from a shopkeeper. "Let's see how." He never finished the sentence. Marcus moved, and the world blurred. The first enforcer went down before anyone registered movement, his cybernetic spine disconnected with surgical precision. The second had time to raise his weapon before Marcus flowed around him like water, using the Drachnid's own augmented strength against him to drive him through a display case. Krebs fired, plasma bolts tracking with computer-assisted accuracy, but Marcus wasn't there. He moved through the shop like a ghost, each step placing him exactly where the targeting systems didn't expect. The third and fourth enforcers collapsed, their neural processors overloaded by precise strikes to hidden weak points. The fifth enforcer, younger and smarter than the others, turned to run. He made it 2 steps before an antique throwing knife pinned his cybernetic control module to the wall with engineering-grade precision. Krebs' optical implants struggled to track the action, combat protocols failing to predict movements that shouldn't have been possible for a human. His targeting system registered a presence behind him too late. "Impossible," he growled, feeling his motor functions begin to fail. "Our scans showed no augmentations, no combat systems." "Because I don't have any," Marcus replied calmly, releasing pressure points that had temporarily paralyzed the Drachnid enforcer. Humanity's greatest weapons were never our technology. They were our adaptability, our capacity to learn, and our very long memory for threats to our families. Krebs crashed to his knees, his cybernetic systems cycling through emergency reboots. "You? What are you?" "Just a shopkeeper," Marcus said, already beginning to clear the debris. "One who's giving you a message to deliver to Forcath. This sector is now under protection. My protection. No fees, no extortion, no threats. The next enforcers who come won't get the chance to report back." As station security finally arrived, conspicuously late, they found a calm human shopkeeper reporting a failed robbery attempt. The enforcers were alive but unconscious, their cybernetic systems scrambled in ways that would take experts weeks to understand. Later, after the reports were filed and the shop restored, Sarah found Marcus in their private quarters above the store. He stood at the window, watching the station's night cycle begin. "They'll come in force next time," she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Marcus nodded. "I know, but they'll come prepared for the wrong kind of fight. They still think this is about strength, about dominance." He turned to face her, and for the first time in years, she saw the full weight of his training in his eyes. "They haven't realized yet that I spent 15 years as humanity's shadow, learning every weakness of every species we encountered. Not to conquer, but to protect. They'll learn, though, tomorrow." In the artificial night, Marcus Chen began preparing for a war that would be fought not with brute force, but with the quiet precision that had made humanity's intelligence operatives legendary. The Drachnids were about to learn why Earth's unofficial motto had become, "Speak softly," and carry contingency plans for every species in known space. Shadows of the past. Word spread through Gamma Station's underworld like a plasma fire. 6 Drachnid enforcers, their cutting-edge combat systems defeated by an unarmed human. The story grew with each telling. Some claimed the shopkeeper was a ghost. Others whispered he was a prototype of a new human super-soldier program. The truth, as always, was more interesting. In his private workshop above the shop, Marcus accessed a quantum-encrypted channel he hadn't used in 15 years. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the woman with silver hair and eyes that had seen too much of the galaxy's darkness. "Director Chen," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Or should I say, Shopkeeper Chen. "Helena." Marcus's voice carried recognition, but no warmth. "The Ghost Protocol is still active. It never stopped." Helena's hologram shifted, displaying data streams of Drachnid activity across 3 sectors. "When you disappeared after the Arcturus incident, we respected your choice. But we never stopped watching. The Drachnids aren't just criminals, Marcus. They're a symptom." In the shop below, Sarah was serving a customer, a tall, elegantly dressed Aetherian, who seemed unusually interested in Earth's pre-spaceflight military histories. Marcus's enhanced surveillance systems had already identified 3 more customers strategically positioned around the sector. Old colleagues watching his back without orders. "The Syndicate," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "They're using the Drachnids as a front." Helena nodded. "The same organization we fought 15 years ago. They're smarter now, using alien proxy forces instead of direct action. The Drachnids think they're building their own empire, but they're just pawns." Marcus closed his eyes, remembering Arcturus, a colony world, a hidden syndicate base, and a choice between completing his mission and saving civilians. He'd chosen the civilians, broken protocol, and disappeared. It had cost him his career but given him Sarah, one of the colonists he'd saved. "I'm not coming back," he said firmly. "But I want everything you have on the Drachnid operation here. Their real chain of command, their supply lines, their weaknesses." "Already sent," Helena replied. "And Marcus, the Syndicate knows you're there. Vorkath received new orders this morning. They're not just coming for you now. They're coming for everyone you've ever spoken to on that station." The transmission ended as the shop's proximity alerts triggered. 3 heavily armed Drachnid shuttles had just docked at the station's military port, their transponders marking them as private security vessels. But Marcus's systems, tied into the station's sensor network through backdoors he'd spent months creating, detected the weapons hidden in their hulls. Sarah appeared in the workshop doorway. "Company." Marcus nodded, already moving to a hidden panel in the wall. Inside was not the weapons cache someone might expect, but rather a collection of seemingly random items: old mechanical watches, antique lockpicks, paper maps of the station's original design. "They'll expect me to fight like a ghost operative," he explained, selecting items with precise care. "With high-tech weapons and shadowy tactics. But that's not who I am anymore." He held up a simple pocket watch. "I'm a collector of humanity's history, and our history is full of people doing the impossible with nothing but ingenuity and determination." The first explosions rocked the station as Vorkath's forces began their assault, but they were targeting empty warehouses, abandoned corridors, following combat protocols designed to counter ghost operatives. Meanwhile, Marcus was leading a group of terrified merchants through maintenance tunnels that hadn't been used in decades, their paths marked by old mechanical markers that no modern scanner could detect. "The station's original builders," he explained as they moved, left behind a maze of maintenance passages. They didn't trust fully automated systems, so they built mechanical backups for everything. Backups that don't show up on modern scans. Sarah watched him work with the same fascination she'd had when they first met. He wasn't just moving through the station. He was using its history as a weapon. Ancient ventilation systems became ambush points. Mechanical pressure doors, forgotten by modern engineers, turned corridors into traps. Above them, Vorkath's forces were fighting shadows, their advanced combat systems overwhelmed by contradictory data. Every sensor showed different readings. Every tactical analysis failed to predict where strikes would come from. And in their confusion, they failed to notice that the station's civilian population was quietly disappearing into the depths of history. "You planned this," Sarah realized as they reached a massive chamber deep in the station's core. "All those years studying the station's archives, collecting old tech. You were building a fortress that no modern army could crack. Marcus smiled, the expression carrying both pride and sadness. I was the best because I understood that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our fighting spirit. It's our ability to learn from the past while adapting to the future. He turned to address the gathered merchants and families. Welcome to Heritage Hall, the station's original emergency bunker, designed to be self-sufficient and completely off the grid. As the refugees settled in, Marcus checked his antique pocket watch. Its hands didn't just tell time. They were synchronized with mechanical systems throughout the station, systems about to remind everyone why humanity had survived first contact despite being technologically outmatched. The Drachnids were about to learn that they weren't fighting a ghost operative. They were fighting something far more dangerous, a human who had learned to combine the wisdom of the past with the knowledge of the future. And as the station's ancient defense systems began to wake, Marcus Chen prepared to teach them why humanity's museums were filled with the artifacts of civilizations that had underestimated Earth's children. The hunter's game. Vorkath stood in the Drachnid command center, his cybernetic implants processing tactical data streams that made no sense. 40 elite warriors, equipped with the latest combat augmentations, were being systematically isolated and neutralized by old technology. Their neural combat processors were reporting impossible readings, their targeting systems focusing on threats that didn't exist. How? He roared, smashing a holographic display. How is one human doing this? In the shadows of Heritage Hall, Marcus watched the chaos unfold through a network of ancient mechanical observation ports. The station's original designers had built redundancies into everything, including surveillance, while the Drachnid's advanced systems searched for electronic signatures and energy readings. Marcus tracked them through brass and glass, gears and mirrors. They're splitting into smaller teams, Sarah observed, studying the mechanical readouts beside him. Trying to cover more ground. Marcus nodded. Exactly as expected. Their combat protocols are designed to adapt to modern threats. They can't comprehend that they're being defeated by technology from humanity's industrial age. Throughout the station, the trap was springing. When the Drachnid's sensors detected movement in a corridor, they found only ancient clockwork automatons, designed centuries ago as maintenance robots. When they tried to access the station's security systems, they instead triggered mechanical locks that sealed them in sections designated for decontamination. Sir, one of Vorkath's lieutenants reported, his cybernetic voice trembling. We've lost contact with teams 3 through 7. And there's something else. The humans, all of them, they vanished. In Heritage Hall, Marcus checked another mechanical readout. The civilian evacuation was complete. Every merchant, worker, and family had been safely relocated through passages that hadn't appeared on station maps for centuries. Now came the hard part. The syndicate won't stop. Helena's voice crackled through an old radio transmitter. No quantum encryption, just simple amplitude modulation that the Drachnid's advanced systems filtered out as background noise. Vorkath is receiving new orders. They're authorizing lethal force against all humans on the station. Marcus stood, his movements carrying the fluid grace of someone who had never truly stopped being a predator. Sarah, initiate Protocol Omega, just like we practiced. She nodded, moving to a massive brass control panel that looked more like a pipe organ than a computer. As her fingers danced across the mechanical keys, the station's original environmental systems began to wake. Not the modern atmospheric processors, but massive steam-driven pumps and filters that had been maintained in secret for decades. Throughout the station, the temperature began to drop. Condensation formed on walls, then froze. The Drachnid's cybernetic systems, calibrated for standard environmental conditions, began to malfunction in the extreme cold. Clever, Vorkath growled, watching his warriors struggle, using our environmental requirements against us, but not clever enough. He transmitted new orders, and his remaining forces began deploying thermal equipment. But Marcus was already moving. Through maintenance shafts and forgotten corridors, He became the ghost that rumors had named him. The Drachnids, their sensors compromised by the cold, never saw him coming. Team 8 fell when their radiation shielding mysteriously failed, forcing them to retreat. Team 9 found themselves trapped in a magnetic field generated by ancient superconductors, their cybernetic implants rendered useless. Team 10 simply disappeared, their signals lost in a maze of mirrors and mechanical holograms designed centuries before digital technology. "This is impossible," Vorkath's lieutenant whispered, watching their forces disappear. "He's using museum pieces to defeat military-grade technology." "No," Vorkath replied, his optical implants finally recognizing the pattern. "He's using our assumptions against us. We thought humanity's strength was their technology, their ghost protocol operatives. But their real power is their history," Marcus finished, stepping out of a hidden door behind them. "Every defeat, every setback, every time we were technologically outmatched, we learned, adapted, found ways to turn our opponent's strengths into weaknesses." The command center erupted into chaos. Drachnid warriors fired advanced weapons at a target that moved like water through their defenses, using their own momentum against them. Marcus didn't fight like a modern operative. He fought like every warrior humanity had ever produced, combining techniques from centuries of combat into something unpredictable. "The Syndicate made a mistake," Marcus said, disabling warriors with precise strikes to weaknesses that no modern combat database had recorded. They thought erasing their digital footprint would hide them. They forgot that humanity's memory doesn't depend on computers. Vorkath, watching his command crumble, finally understood. They had prepared to fight a ghost operative, a product of humanity's most advanced military programs. Instead, they were fighting something far more dangerous, a human who had learned from every battle his species had ever fought. As the last of his warriors fell, Vorkath faced Marcus alone. "What are you?" he demanded. Marcus stood calmly, his posture reflecting centuries of martial knowledge. "I'm a curator of humanity's past, and right now I'm giving you a choice. Surrender, expose the Syndicate's operations, and live. Or don't, and become another exhibit in humanity's long history of overcoming impossible odds." The station's ancient systems hummed around them, a mechanical heartbeat that had kept beating long after its digital replacements had been installed. In that moment, Vorkath realized that his forces hadn't just been defeated by one man, they had been defeated by the accumulated wisdom of an entire species that had never forgotten its roots. Legacy of peace. The aftermath of the battle transformed Gamma Station. In the cold light of artificial dawn, Drachnid warriors sat in makeshift cells constructed from repurposed cargo containers, their advanced cybernetics neutralized by magnetic fields generated by centuries-old technology. But it was the data recovered from Vorkath's command systems that truly changed everything. The Syndicate's entire operation, Helena's hologram flickered as she reviewed the files. Shell companies, proxy forces, infiltration protocols, all of it exposed. "You did more damage to their organization in one night than we managed in 15 years of direct operations." Marcus stood in Heritage Hall, now transformed into a command center where station security and representatives from various species gathered. Sarah worked alongside them, using the ancient mechanical systems to restore the station's normal operations. "They forgot the most important lesson about humanity," Marcus said, watching as families began returning to their homes through the secret passages. "Our greatest weapon isn't our technology or our combat prowess. It's our ability to learn from every encounter, every defeat, every victory." Vorkath, stripped of his combat enhancements, sat quietly in a corner under guard. The former Drachnid commander had finally understood the full scope of how thoroughly they'd been deceived, not just by Marcus, but by the Syndicate itself. "Our empire fell because we relied too heavily on technological superiority," Vorkath spoke, his voice now lacking its mechanical resonance. "We became predictable. But you kept all the old ways alive alongside the new. Every piece in your shop wasn't just merchandise, it was knowledge preserved." Marcus nodded, lifting an ancient Earth compass from his pocket. Every artifact tells a story of survival, of adaptation. When your forces attacked, we didn't just use old technology. We used old strategies, old wisdom. The same principles that helped humanity survive its earliest challenges still work today. The station's governing council had convened an emergency session. The evidence recovered from Vorkath's systems revealed corruption at the highest levels, showing how the Syndicate had slowly infiltrated power structures across multiple sectors. But more importantly, it showed a path forward. The Drachnids aren't inherently violent, Marcus explained to the council. They were manipulated, their warrior culture twisted into something it was never meant to be. The Syndicate exploited their pride, their sense of lost glory. But now they have a chance to reclaim their true heritage. In the days that followed, change swept through Gamma Station. The Drachnid enforcers, freed from the Syndicate's influence, began working with local security forces. Their combat expertise, tempered by the harsh lesson in humility, proved invaluable in maintaining peace. Sarah found Marcus in their shop a week later, carefully restoring a display of Earth's historical navigation instruments. "You knew this would happen," she said. "Not just the victory, the reconciliation." Marcus smiled, adjusting a sextant to catch the light. Humanity's greatest achievements weren't our wars or our technological breakthroughs. They were the moments we turned enemies into allies by showing them a better path. A chime announced visitors. A group of young Drachnids, their cybernetic enhancements minimal compared to their former combat systems. They moved with uncertainty, caught between their warrior heritage and their desire for change. "We want to learn," their leader said simply, "not just about combat or technology. We want to learn how humans keep their balance between progress and tradition, between strength and wisdom." Marcus gestured to the artifacts surrounding them. "Every piece here tells a story of that balance. The trick isn't choosing between old and new, between peace and strength. It's understanding that true power comes from combining all of it, from learning every lesson history has to teach." High above, Gamma Station continued its orbit, its ancient mechanical heart beating alongside its modern systems. In the marketplace, humans and Drachnids worked together, sharing stories and traditions. The Syndicate had tried to exploit divisions between species, but they'd failed to understand a fundamental truth about humanity. We didn't become a galactic power by being the strongest or the most advanced. We did it by being the best students, the most adaptable learners, and, when necessary, the most forgiving teachers. In his shop, Marcus Chen watched this new future unfold, knowing that the next generation would face its own challenges. But they would face them with the combined wisdom of multiple species and the understanding that true strength lies not in domination, but in the ability to learn, adapt, and grow together. The antique watch in his pocket continued its steady tick, marking time not just for humanity, but for all species who had learned that the future belongs to those who remember their past while embracing change. It was a lesson written in the stars themselves, in the stories of countless civilizations, and in the heart of every being who chose wisdom over power. End.